So I'm super excited to have you all come today. This is the first time I'm doing this specific topic on artificial intelligence within the real estate community. And for those of you who don't know, my name's Steve, and I'm the CEO of a company called AnySizeDeals. And the whole concept behind the company is to really bring people together within the real estate company on specific topics. So I like to have events that are focused on one topic at a time. Today we're focusing on artificial intelligence because it's a big topic that I think is influencing every aspect of our lives. If you look at Amazon, to even the US government, the amount of money they're spending, there's a lot of competition for it. And my take on it is that people within the real estate space should always be at the cutting edge when it comes to technology, because we're responsible for providing homes for people, venues like this, and office. And if you think about it, the way you build and design things automatically has an effect on how people use this, right? So if there are new technologies that are changing how people interact, it makes sense that you're well versed on the topic. So with that said, before we get into our day, there's a few people I have to thank. I have to thank my lovely wife, Liz. She's not here with us today. She's usually here. She's with her 7-month-old daughter, Leah. I want to thank my other kids. I want to thank my parents. I want to thank all the speakers for participating. I want to thank you guys for attending. I want to thank Toby for hosting us at her lovely hotel here in Brooklyn. Thank all the media partners. And I just want to thank everybody for really supporting. We have a little booklet called ASD Mag. So the concept of this is really going forward. If you write opinion pieces about any topic within the real estate space and you're looking for an outlet for it, please send them over. The idea is that when we have these conferences, we can put a lot of content in there. And we like to put a keynote on the cover. So John is on
I apologize for that.
That's not good. So with that said, I'm super excited. We have a great day today. We have a keynote with John. Then we have 2 great panel discussions and a couple of solo presentations. So it's going to be a fun day. Please make sure to interact with all the people around you. Everybody in this room has a lot of value. And if you're going to spend the day with us this morning, make the most of it. The reason I chose John to be the keynote is because he has a very unique background, right? So he works in development and management and ownership, but at the same time, he's well-versed in technology, and he's the co-creator of an application called Nson, which is a building operating system, and he's going to be able to tell us a little bit more about it. But I just felt like he's in a position where he can talk about it from both sides, from the servicer side and from the user side. So without further ado, welcome, John.
Thank you very much.
So my first question to you, John, how do you have a tech background or do you have a real estate background and you got into technology?
Well, my background, I guess I should start by saying the only job that I've ever had that's better than the one I have now was wrangling horses in Montana. And I'd say that in all seriousness because what it taught me very early on, and this was in my summers in college up in Glacier National Park. If anybody's ever been there, it's a pretty special place on the planet. But it taught me ultimately that no mountain is too high to climb. And when you're in a terrible, awful spot where you think you can't get out of, there's always a solution to find.
That's great. So with your experience at Rudin, how did the idea come about to build Nson? Like, what was the impetus? Hey, we have to build our own software versus?
Well, it wasn't vision. People say, wow, you thought this all up, but it really came about in 2009. I guess the roots of this really go back to 1995 when we created 55 Broad Street. That building was built by the Rudins in the mid-60s. It was a very successful building. Drexel Burnham Lambert was in that building. Then U.S. Attorney Rudy Giuliani caught Michael Milken with his fingers in the cookie jar. That company went bust. So literally, we went from a fully occupied, rip-roaring, great building to 0 occupancy, and it sat like that for 6 years. People forget, the early 90s, Lower Manhattan had 30 million square feet of vacant space. Most cities don't even have 30 million square feet in their actual overall portfolio. It was vacant in Lower Manhattan. And we were sitting with a $6 year vacant building. How the heck do we differentiate this building from all other buildings that were vacant and deemed, unusable and unoccupiable? And thank goodness Al Gore was kind enough to create the internet for us all. And Nicholas Negroponte wrote an amazing book. I was thinking about this yesterday. I want to go back and read it, called Being Digital. And the theme of that book was the world will become digital. And this invention called the internet will enable the world to be digital. And if you're living in an analog world today, you should be thinking about digital solutions to the issues and problems that you face every day. And we read that book, and in that book, I think Bill Rudin used to cite the page, I think it's page 93, it talks about smart, ready real estate. And we looked at that and we said, wow, maybe there is a relationship between this thing called the internet and our buildings. And we read it, we started drilling down, we did our due diligence, and we were the first to literally bring optical fiber to the desktop. And 55 Broad Street was reborn as now called the grandfather of all smart buildings. So that's when it started. We then fast forward to 2009. Con Edison was part of a stimulus package that President Obama had put out, a smart grid demonstration project. They asked us Rudin to be the commercial office petri dish, to understand how the customer of Con Ed could relate to them in a digital fashion. And we walk into our first meeting and they've got a screen up on the wall and they show, this is the grid in August of 2003. Does anybody remember what happened in August of 2003? 55 million people, thank you David, 55 million people lost power because it was a blackout that stretched from Montreal to south of New York City. And they showed the grid and they basically posed a really, really interesting question to us. We, Con Ed, had a 45-second early warning that something bad was going to happen, and we want to give you, Rudin, and your friendly and unfriendly competitors at least 30 seconds of that early warning. Do you want it? We're like, absolutely. We can program our elevators. They can sense that dip in frequency of the grid. They go to the nearest floor. They let people out. Nobody gets stuck in a Rudin building when the lights go out ultimately. We walked out of that meeting. Gene Bonnieberger, who's my senior vice president, co-inventor of Nantum. I said, Gene, how the heck are we going to do that in 30 seconds? He looked at me and says, I have no idea. So we literally walked around the corner from Con Ed on 14th Street. There's a pizzeria there. We sat down. I had an early iPhone. I pulled out my iPhone. I put it on the table. We started talking, how are we going to do this? What about this? What about that? What about this? I looked down at my phone and I said, this silly thing has an operating system. Why don't our buildings have an operating system? Why don't we have a single integrated platform that every bit of data, whether it's internal data that we're already collecting or external data like Con Ed wants to give us, has a place to sleep, has a place to rest, has a place to be analyzed, utilized, and made actionable. And we're like, yeah, that's what we got to do. And we said, you know what? Simple concept, basic common sense. Somebody else must have invented it, must have created it. Let's go find those people. We searched and searched and searched, couldn't find them, show that it didn't exist, and so we set out to build it ourselves. And that's what we did.
Right. And in the process of building this, because I always wondered what were the other owners in similar situations thinking, right? So when you guys launched this, what goes through your mind? Oh, we have an opportunity to launch, separate this and make it a third-party company, sell to our peers, or do we just want to keep it as a competitive advantage?
Well, we knew we were building ourselves a tool, a new wrench, a new hammer, a new, whatever tool analogy you want to use. And when we built it, we began to show it to our friendly competitors, and many of them said, wow, that's a really great idea. Let's see how it would work in our building. And we began to deploy it in other buildings. We began to show it to our customers. David Genovese is here from BlackRock. Somebody, as a company, as an enterprise, as smart and as leading and as cutting edge of anybody in the city of New York. And my prediction is they will win the Mayor's Carbon Challenge as an enterprise because they really care about this. And so we began to deploy it with people who got it and understood it. And the more we deployed, the more we understood. Today, we've got the largest bank as in the world as a customer, largest asset manager, largest hedge fund, largest REIT, largest state-owned utility. So the people who get it, understand it, see it, and want it. From our standpoint, we're saving roughly 55 cents a foot across our 10 million square foot portfolio. That's shared with our customers. That's a $5.5 million annual savings. Put a 5 cap on that. That's real money. The other piece of it is that it not only saves money, but it enhances the experience. We've cut our hot and cold calls by 70 to 80% because Nantum can actually anticipate discomfort before it's felt and fix it. Another piece is water. What we're really doing in artificial intelligence, we're here, a lot of people say, well, real estate people don't have a lot of intelligence, so we need to use artificial intelligence ultimately to help ourselves. AI, what is AI, right? And what we've done is we've mapped all of the rhythms of our buildings so that we can understand when they get out of rhythm. Example, 845 3rd, British government is a major tenant there. Sunday morning or Saturday afternoon, building manager goes home, doesn't come back until Monday. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, Nantum senses too much water being utilized, pings an email, text to the building manager. Building manager goes to the building, sees that a flushometer had burst in the basement, water running very quickly towards the elevator pit. Had he waited till Monday to get there, that building probably wouldn't have opened up because of the amount of water that was running towards that elevator pit. So using sensors to identify anomalies in normal activities in a building and artificially then using that data to ultimately get action to be made. And that saved that building from probably 2 days of not being open.
That's a very interesting use case. Is there, in terms of how people use the building, besides that, are you tracking like movements within a building? Are you tracking like when people get up, go to bed? Like what sort of stuff are you tracking? And are there any concerns from a privacy standpoint?
I don't care who you are, but I care how many of you there are, and I care about where you are. So right now I'm looking at Nantum. It's mobile, so our folks can. When I walked in here, when I got up on stage here, there were about 8,000 people throughout our portfolio. Right now there's 13,723. Why is that important? It's important because we use occupancy ultimately to influence the amount of energy that we're utilizing to create comfort, right? Temperature is our report card, right? Hot and cold calls are our report card. So in this situation, we track occupancy. What we're working with BlackRock on is actually doing it on a floor by floor basis. It's their data. They're able to analyze it. They're able to understand how their space is being utilized. That's going to influence how they build their space in their new home when they leave us and go to Hudson Yards. It's going to influence ultimately how they message to their existing employees, attracting new talent, messaging ultimately to their stockholders and their shareholders. This becomes really, really important from an overall business standpoint, not just the nuts and bolts, blocking and tackling of running property, but ultimately how our customers are using this data to message to the people that matter to them the most. So this is what's really important. You can see, and it'll be interesting by the time I get off stage how many people, but we're already using almost 20 megawatts of power. That's a lot of power. We've 96,458 gallons of water. During the summer, that'll be up over 1 million gallons during the day as our cooling towers kick on. And I'm consuming 98 M-pounds of steam. So to be able to just understand that, have situational awareness on a building, for me, the aggregate as Chief Operating Officer at Rudin, but for our building managers on a building-wide basis, and for our customers on a floor-by-floor basis. You know, we need to have we've identified three important digital conversations to have within our ecosystem. One, our buildings, fans, pumps, motors, chillers, elevators. I need to speak to them, they need to speak to me. Enterprise, I need to be able to have a digital conversation with every one of my tenants. And lastly, and not, probably the most importantly, this will become the most important sensor that any building will have. Because well, we've created some of the pandas here, our CEO, we've created a tenant experience app that will be launched here in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Navy Yard at Dock 72, so that to get into the building, you can get on a plane, you sure as hell should be able to get into a building. Once that data, what people order for lunch, how many guests, our guest data, we have over 1 million guests annually that come into Rudin properties. That's a huge piece of data that's very instructive. Where are those guests going? How do I deploy the proper fan speed and comfort to those floors? How do I make sure that the experience as a guest is as great an experience as an occupant? All very important and can be instructed through data.
So let me ask you, you said at a few events that you think real estate companies should view themselves as tech companies, right? To a certain degree. So based on what you're describing, you have millions of people going through your property every day. Do you view almost like you should approach as if you were, let's say, Amazon or Google, to track all and every activity that's happening to figure out how to best deliver this? And if real estate companies should consider themselves as tech companies, what would you say to all your peers who most people don't think they're adopting technology at a fast enough rate, let alone viewing themselves as tech companies?
Well, we used to say that we were a real estate company that dabbled in technology. We now say we're a technology company that dabbles in real estate. Because everything that we produce is data. And if we're not organizing that data, and if we don't have a system of record like Nson that ultimately is formulating that data, using that data to ultimately predict and prescribe what we should be doing tomorrow, then we're not doing our job. So I think that every company, you talk to Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan Chase, you speak to the head of the Bank of New York, they look at themselves as a technology company.
I mean, definitely finance companies are way ahead of the curve when it comes to technology. I don't know if it's because it has to do with money and people interact with money differently. But if you're an owner-operator, yes, you're aware you need technology, but you can still make a lot of money even if you haven't fully adopted it, right? So there's sort of that disconnect. Obviously, you guys are forward-thinking, but a lot of owners aren't there yet. At least that's my take, and that's the feedback I get from some startups.
I think they're getting there. I think here's the problem from an owner standpoint. Each of us, and from an enterprise tenant standpoint, each of us are inundated by small startups knocking on our door saying, we got the greatest things since sliced bread, let me put it in your building, okay? Understand that if you are a small startup knocking on property owners' doors, you are not alone, okay? The beauty of that, from a Nson standpoint, is that we built an operating system, so in my dynamic graphs, I can literally plug your software into Nson. I've created a moat around the BMS, so there's security there. You plug in, on day one, I can immediately begin to analyze your data against any other data set that I'm already collecting. Hugely, hugely valuable, and I've future-proofed. A Nson-enabled building is now future-proofed because that data becomes valuable or not, right? We can determine very quickly whether your data is helpful or not in terms of running the building. So, I think, what's happening is that what we chose and what we saw was there was two paths. One path was I'm going to go down this path and I'm going to have 15 dashboards running my buildings. Or I have a single cockpit, Nantum, running my buildings, and applications being able to plug into that cockpit and expressing their data in real time immediately. We obviously chose the left path. And we think that that's the right way to go. And I think more and more as property owners, let's understand real estate. Real estate, number one fact, largest asset class in the world. Second fact, when I sign a 20-year lease, I put that lease in the drawer and I manage that building. Generally, my focus is on the next deal, right? So we're at Rudin, we're very focused on making sure that deal, we've had tenants who have been customers of ours for 50 years because we nurture that relationship. So our view is, hey, yeah, I'm looking at the next deal, but simultaneously, I want to make sure that these folks that I've already done deals with are happy, want to re-up, and want to be part of the Rudin family. So I think more and more as the markets mature and people realize, doesn't take a genius to figure out that re-tenanting a building is very expensive and it has to be amortized over a number of years. As people now are coming to us and wanting more flexibility and shorter leases, we've got to be able to meet that market.
That does make a lot of sense. I'm going to ask you a question, not necessarily real estate related, but overall in terms of the direction in which the world is going when it comes to artificial intelligence and also robotics. Historically, when we've had a new transition, let's say when we went from working on farms to working in factories, there was always this concern that people are going to be displaced. But it turns out that the jobs that were created were higher earning jobs, and we ended up employing more people. There's this whole fear that when it comes to artificial intelligence and robotics, we won't necessarily, we'll have more high paying jobs, but we're going to employ significantly fewer people. So governments are thinking of different ways to kind of, as a counterpoint, so what are we going to do with all these people? One thing that came out is something called universal basic income, where they'll give checks to people not to work, and there's a whole argument whether it's beneficial or not. What's kind of your overall view and sense of the pros and cons of AI and how to solve this from a macro perspective?
Well, if somebody gave me a check not to work, I'd never get out of bed, right?
Supposedly, they won't still give you a fat check, though. It won't.
I don't know, I'm old school from the standpoint, one of the greatest days of my life as a very young person was my first paycheck. And that I earned that money, I put it in the bank, I still have my little savings account, book that we used to get stamped, and when you go to the bank and you'd see that grow. I believe in incentive. I believe that the hunger in life, whether it's in personal relationships or in work, comes from within, and there's nothing that anybody can do from the external that can influence that if I know who the hell I am and I'm excited about what I'm doing. So that's my own personal view of life. In terms of how robotics, artificial intelligence will impact the workforce, I see more jobs, not less. I see different jobs. A perfect example is a company called MadeBot, which is a young Cornell engineer. We met him early on in the process. He's created a robot that vacuums. It's called Rosie. And for those of us who remember the Jetsons, that was their, Rosie was their person or their robot. What's fascinating about that is that in order for Rosie to work, Rosie needs to understand the built environment that she's in. So she needs from a geospatial standpoint, she goes into a conference room, she needs to know where everything is. So she's not bumping into tables, she's not bumping into, walls. So I think Rosie, that type of robotic from a facility standpoint, You're going to hear from the folks, in terms of building space robotically after I speak. But, I think it's there, right? It's tasks that can be done by machines. This is something that's happened in our society over and over and over again.
So you think there's no fear that we're going to get to the point where most people are unemployed because all employees are using robots?
I think that's a dystopia movie that, is pretty ugly. No, I don't believe that.
And I was going to segue into my next question, where Elon Musk is really paranoid when it comes to AI versus Mark Zuckerberg, who's all for it. So would you consider yourself more you're optimistic in terms of your view, or do you have some concerns as well? From an ethical standpoint, what should we use AI for, or what can't we use it for, etc.?
I think there are limits, there are edges that we have to be careful that we go over, but I'm not paranoid about it at all. I'm very excited about it. I think that there's an exciting world if we're able to unleash the ability, the freedom to think. I think we should really watch what's going on in China right now for a lot of reasons. They've got this thing called the social scoring system, and everybody in China is ultimately use either WeChat or the other one that is in terms of purchasing with your phone. Well, that's being tracked by the government, and you're not only being tracked by the government, but you're being rated. So if you're buying too much alcohol, you get demerits. If you're late on your taxes, you get demerits. If you are donating to your local charities, you get thumbs up. That stuff scares me, actually. There's one dissident over there who went to the train station to buy a ticket to go to Beijing to another city, and they said, no, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to travel because you've got too many negative points. That's scary to me. In the wrong hands, that's bad.
So we're almost out of time, and I realize I didn't open up to audience questions. So does anyone have a question for John? Justin?
Yeah, incredible discussion. Seriously, I think you guys are obviously way ahead of your time. I'm a real estate developer here in New York and San Francisco. And the main question is, how are you guys attaching to building systems that are totally antiquated, right? Which is a big issue in New York. I was just curious how this modern system plugs into a gas boiler, right, or an oil boiler. I mean, how are you tracking data on stabilized buildings, or is that possible?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually have we've got 22 apartment buildings, many of them built before World War II, still having the dumbest closed loop systems known to mankind, single pipe systems. But the beauty of Nson is that it can ride on top of anything. Sonu is here, and his team is developed probably the largest driver library that exists anywhere in terms of, okay, how do I talk to this device? How do I talk to this meter? How do I talk to that pump? How do I talk to that fan? How do I talk to that BMS? So the beauty of it is it's not rip and replace. It's all about data, and it's all about grabbing that and making sense of it. I think one of the most important things, I've had a couple conversations with folks here today, the FCC has just unleashed an enormous amount of 150 megahertz of spectrum it's the old Citizens Band radio spectrum that is now being given for free to property owners and to customers in our buildings, our enterprise customers, to utilize that spectrum as they see fit for free. So the ability to create a network, an Internet of Things within an apartment building that may be dumb, but to do that inexpensively, we're working with a Norwegian company that makes sensors now. They're literally the size of my thumbnail. They have a 15-year battery life. They've been around 15 years, so we're trusting them on the 15-year battery life. But they have a radio in them, and they can sense whether a door is open or closed. They can sense temperature. They can sense humidity, and they're $1 a month. So you take that free spectrum, Ruckus is, I think, the leader in terms of creating hardware to grab that spectrum, and you take these sensors, and now you've created a network that will give you as much data as you need. With the brain, with Nantum, we like to say buildings have always had a heart, engine room, boiler room. Now they have a brain, Nantum, final frontier, central nervous system. Well, we've just designed that central nervous system with sensors and with a wireless network that ultimately can grab that data, bring it back to the brain, and the brain can predict and prescribe what should be done in that building.
We have time for one more question. Anyone else have a question? All right, seems like we covered everything. Thank you so much, John.
My pleasure. Thank you all very much.